Am I right?
Hello?
What if the most impressive thing about A24's Backrooms is not that it turns a viral internet horror myth into a movie, but that it understands the worst thing it could do is explain too much? Because that is the trap sitting under this entire adaptation, and honestly, it is also the thing that makes the movie feel promising. Backrooms was never scary because it had the cleanest mythology. It was scary because it felt like a place you were not supposed to be able to access, yet somehow could. A wrong turn through reality, a glitch in architecture, an infinite dead zone made out of offices, hallways, fluorescent hum, damp carpet, stale air, and the crushing panic of knowing that nothing should be this empty and still exist at all. The internet did not fall in love with Backrooms because it gave perfect answers. It fell in love with it because the concept activated something primitive, the fear of endless space with no witness, no logic, and no exit. That is why adapting it into a feature has always seemed both brilliant and dangerous. Brilliant because the setting is absolutely built for cinema. Dangerous because cinema has a bad habit of over-translating internet horror, sanding off the ambiguity, and replacing dread with over-designed explanation. The new A24 trailer gives me hope because it does not seem eager to do that. Yes, it offers a more legible story frame than Kane Parsons' original found footage series. Yes, it puts real actors at the center. Yes, it gives us a furniture store owner, a therapist, and a recognizable plot entrance into the maze. But the footage still feels committed to the idea that the Backrooms are scariest when they remain spiritually wrong, not merely narratively useful. That is a huge distinction because the trailer is not just trying to tell you there is another dimension, it is trying to make you feel that reality itself has become unreliable. That is the correct way into this material. Chiwetel Ejiofor appears to be playing a man who discovers an opening to the Backrooms inside his furniture store wall, which is already a strong choice because it turns one kind of mundane, commercial, overlit emptiness into another. A furniture store is a perfect threshold space for this mythology. It is built out of staged domesticity, fake homes, displayed normalcy, walk-through rooms that already feel a little unreal when nobody else is inside them. To hide a breach to another dimension, there is almost funny in its precision, and the trailer seems to understand that the horror is not just there is a portal in the wall, it is that the portal leads to a place containing objects from different times, fractured rules, and a scale of emptiness that does not obey human intention. That makes Renate's role interesting too, because in the trailer, the therapist setup does not feel like a normal exposition device. It feels like the movie is weaponizing disbelief. Ejiofor's character is trying to describe something that should sound impossible, and Reinsve's character seems to move from skepticism into direct involvement. That movement matters because Backrooms horror has always depended on one crucial shift, the moment when the impossible stops sounding abstract and becomes spatially real. Once she enters that place herself, the film no longer has to argue whether it exists. It only has to ask how much it can hurt you. And judging from the trailer, the answer seems to be a lot. What I like most is that the film does not appear to be abandoning the original texture. That made Kane Parsons' series so effective. That series blew up because it used found footage and industrial liminal imagery in a way that felt accidentally discovered rather than aggressively performed. Parsons understood how to weaponize stillness, low-resolution framing, distant movement, and architecture that felt like it had slipped outside ordinary design. The movie obviously cannot be just that for 2 hours. It needs a broader dramatic structure, but the trailer still carries those vibes in the right places. Protective suits, research-like incursions, hallways that feel too long, rooms that look generated by memory instead of construction, figures present in the frame without reassuring you that the frame understands them. That continuity matters, and that is probably why Kane Parsons being in the director's chair still feels like the movie's smartest asset. This is not a case where a studio bought an internet phenomenon and handed it to somebody who might flatten it into generic lore horror. Parsons is one of the youngest directors A24 has worked with, and that alone is part of the film's fascination. He built the viral version. He understands what the audience actually found terrifying in it. That does not guarantee the leap to feature filmmaking will work. Sometimes the skill set is not transferable, but in terms of protecting tone, mood, and conceptual integrity, it is hard to imagine a better person to at least attempt the transition. There is also something clever about how this trailer seems to position the movie between two modes of Backrooms fear. One is the old, pure liminal fear, endless yellow rooms, dead carpeting, architecture as a psychological trap, the horror of being nowhere. The other is the evolved internet lore version, levels, entities, organizations, and a larger ecosystem of threat. The trailer hints at both without fully surrendering to either. That is probably the right move. If you only give audiences emptiness, a feature risks flattening out. If you overload it with creatures, factions, and explanation, you stop making a Backrooms movie and start making a franchise pilot. The sweet spot is somewhere between those extremes, enough structure to move, enough mystery to disturb. This trailer feels like it might know that, and I think the setting is doing an enormous amount of work. Backrooms is one of those rare horror concepts where location is not just important, it is the monster. The Carter's fluorescent bleed, weirdly identical rooms, false exits, and uncanny acoustic emptiness are the threat long before any visible creature shows up. That means the movie's success is going to depend less on jump scares or even creature design than on whether it can make space itself feel predatory. The footage gives me hope there too. Even when characters are moving, the rooms do not feel passive. They feel like they are waiting. That is exactly the sensation the best liminal horror needs. And then there is the release strategy. Ejiofor is putting Backrooms in theaters on May 29, 2026, which is a pretty bold slot for something this internet-coded and structurally odd. That tells me they think this is not just an online curiosity with a built-in fanbase. They think it can function as a real theatrical horror event. That is interesting, because liminal horror is usually intimate, niche, and weirdly anti-crowd in its energy. It lives in headphones, late-night screens, and solitary doom scrolling. Turning it into a theatrical experience means the film has to somehow preserve that private dread while still giving an audience enough shape and scale to hold onto together. That is not easy. But if it works, it could create a very different kind of shared horror than the usual theatrical scream machine. Now, do I think this trailer proves Backrooms will nail the landing? No, there is still a version of this film that overcommits to explanation, overvalues conventional story momentum, and ends up draining the concept of its purest fear. That risk remains huge. The more a movie tells you exactly what the Backrooms are, why they exist, how they connect, and what every threat means, the more it courts becoming just another Monster Labyrinth movie with better branding. The mythology is useful only up to the point where it starts domesticating the dread, but there is also another version. And that version is where A24, Parsons, and the cast understand that mystery is not a garnish here. Mystery is the architecture. The point is not to solve the space. The point is to enter it, survive it if possible, and leave with the sense that reality is weaker than you thought. That is the Backrooms at their best. Not a puzzle box, not a creature showcase. A place that should not exist and therefore makes the rest of existence feel less safe by comparison. That is the movie I want this to be. So where do I land after this new trailer? I think Backrooms looks much more promising when you stop viewing it as the 4chan creepypasta movie and start viewing it as a chance to literalize spatial dread on a big screen, without murdering the mystery that made it famous. Chiwetel Ejiofor and Renate Reinsve give it dramatic credibility. A24 gives it the right kind of horror prestige, without automatically flattening it into art house solemnity. Kane Parsons gives it continuity with the original Nightmare. And the trailer, most importantly, seems aware that the less you truly understand this place, the more power it has over you. That is exactly right, because the Backrooms should never feel fully conquered. They should feel like a wound in reality that we got unlucky enough to Notice dots, so now I want to know what you think. Does Backrooms look like one of the rare internet horror adaptations that might actually understand why the original worked? Or do you think the move to a more conventional film structure could and still ruin the concept? And more importantly, should the movie ever answer what the Backrooms really are? Or is that the one thing it absolutely cannot afford to do? That is the real danger, and May 29th is getting closer.